All right. Well, hello, everyone. We are talking all about how to value your business. I'm going to give you some really practical examples, and everyone wants to know exactly what if you say, if I have a business, A plus B equals C. And unfortunately, that's not exactly how evaluations work. So it's really important that we kind of give you some guidelines for it. So we're going to give you practical examples. I have several co-hosts today. We're going to start with Ryan Finch as one of our co-hosts. Welcome, Ryan.
Let's go. And I'm gonna chime in from the buy side because I look at it like a buyer, right? When you're selling a business, you're trying to come up with a value, but a buyer is also looking at it and setting up that value based on risk, based on their investment, based on their time allocation, and based on the process systems and things that are involved with that as well. So all of those change with each and every business.
Yeah. So, what we're going to talk about is a couple things. If you haven't heard the term SDE or EBITDA, we need to understand what an SBA lender is going to look at. And so we're going to take it from an electrical company. I just met with an electrical company this week. So let's first just talk about what is SDE. So Ryan, tell them what SDA stands for.
All right, so seller discretionary earnings. So essentially that's going to be the things that you're going to be able to add back. So if that is your cell phone bill, or it is sometimes it's defined where you have a salary where you're making $150,000, but the role could actually be taken over by somebody for $100,000, you could add $50,000 back in as seller discretionary earnings.
Yeah. So let's say the tax return shows that the company made 700,000, but the owner also paid themselves 150,000. Maybe the company pays 25,000 for an owner's vehicle. So maybe there is $50,000 of legitimate one-time legal fees or one-time discretionary expenses that the new owner would not necessarily have. So like a perfect example is if they had a legal dispute, they ended up paying $50,000 in legal fees. It was one time. It'll never happen again. It was kind of a fluke. You wouldn't have to count that.
I want to add something. So one of the things you're going to do, and this is the visual, because I'm kind of a visual person. So if you're watching this, one of these things you're going to look at is at the end of the sale of your business, you're going to make a performance. It's going to look like an Excel spreadsheet of your QuickBooks. And that QuickBooks is going to have every expense that me as the new buyer is going to have as an expense tomorrow. So if we close at the end of August, September 1, I've got this expense, and this expense. If that number would not be on there for me to have an expense for that month, then or as you go through the year, then that is something that would be able to be something you could add back. So that's a really clear way for you to look at financials and decide, is this something that I could add back or not?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that you need to look at is that example I was just giving you, that particular business that I was just saying, that the normalized SDE in that particular case might be 925,000. So yesterday, I just met with a guy who wanted to sell an electric company. I've met with multiple. One of the things we specialize in is electric companies, but we had one that, let's pretend that the normalized annual earnings was $1 million. So if I decided that the multiple on that one was 3 times earnings, then 1 million times 3 is 3 million. If I decided it was a 4 multiple, that would be 4 million. 5 multiple, that'd be 5 million. So when two different people come to me and say, my electrical company makes 1 million a year, what's it worth? Versus another one that says, I make 1 million, but I decide that it was a $5 million multiple. That's where we're talking about the differences. So Ryan, do you want to kind of talk about the differences?
Sure.
Kind of what gives you different multiples?
Sure. So, when she's talking about that with the differences, what you're looking at there is how the structure is set up, whether there's reoccurring revenue. So that would change one of the things, how dependent it is on the seller running it every day. So if they have every hat on when they're running it, and this is why, again, you can't go 1 + 2 = 3, because when you go look at a business, again, adding it from the buyer standpoint, if I got to go in there and work a full-time job there, and I'm going to make, $100,000 working there as a full-time job, and that's going to be my profit, then that becomes a difference than when I'm going in and saying, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to finance it, and the financing is going to cover the payment, and on top of that, pay me X amount of money and operate without using a lot of my time, then that's going to be a very different multiple from an investment standpoint.
Yeah. So like for the franchise owner, if the buyer might look at an electrical franchise and say, why am I going to pay a big premium to buy your existing franchise when I could pay the franchise fee and open a new territory myself? That can put a ceiling on the resale value, especially when territories are still available. Plus, there's also royalties, marketing fees, transfer fees, franchise restrictions. So there's a lot to it. So if you have a small owner independent, I'm just doing electrical companies right now, and you can come to us and we'll tell you. But if one is like a one-man show, he does everything, there's no employees, that might be a 2x multiple. If he now has some contractors with him, that might be 3x multiple. If it's an established independent with a lot of employees or several, that might be 3.5x multiple. If it's strong independent, you've got management in place, the guy only works maybe 5 hours a week, who the owner is, that might be a 4x SDE. If it's a highly attractive strategic acquisition where someone's trying to do roll-ups, and we're going to talk about roll-ups in just a minute, that might be a 5x multiple. If you're selling an electrical franchise, like you own the franchise, now that would be another multiple. So again, all of these, we can't give you the exact formula. We can just come to you and say, all right, knowing this, this is what the multiple is for that. Does anyone else want to chime in? Today we've got some exciting news because we've got a bunch of our top brokers, business brokers on our call with us. Anyone else want to chime in on multiples?
Okay. I'd love to jump in.
Okay.
I think,
Well,
each
particular-
each situation, obviously, each transaction is bespoke, right? So every buyer, like Ryan is saying, is going to dig in and they're going to find every expense. They're going to look at everything and they're going to want to know, okay, how can this business run without the owner? Because that's really is what's going to increase the multiplier and makes a business truly attractive.
Well,
Okay,
I think where Ben was able to go with that is really, I mean, when you start looking at it as a platform company too, right? So when you're looking at the buy side, the buyer side, from a strategic point, if they're a platform company, is going to go in and be able to minimize a lot of the expenses. So what you've moved off as seller discretionary earnings because a new buyer comes in and buys it and is going to run it day to day can also be very different to what you can get in a multiple if a strategic buyer comes in that already has the platform company. So they roll your company into theirs. They already have accounting. They already have a Susan that runs a front desk, if you will. Like where they already have those pieces. They don't have those expenses, so they can afford to buy your revenue at a higher rate of return.
Yeah. So now I want to talk about a roll up and what that is. And Ryan, I'll have you talk about one of our really good friends. He does HVAC roll ups and has killed it with it. So you want to just start talking about him real quick and how much success he's had?
Yeah, I mean, he's killed it. I mean, because he has basically gone in and ended up buying a platform company and then set it up and then went in and then was able to set up different subscriptions and then could go to even private equities or roll those all the way out on the back end. And so he would go in, he ran it into a buy box, whatever he was doing based on the EBITDAs, and then he would run that into different sectors. And then he could take that, put them all together, centralize the services, minimize the expenses to really prepare it, take, 2 to 3 years and then get it right. Sometimes it could be longer. And then he would end up exiting those on the back end. One
of the things, just so you know what a roll up is, if you didn't kind of catch it so far, but with this HVAC guy, it's when an investor or a private equity group or a larger HVAC company buys multiple smaller HVAC businesses and combines them into one larger company. So for example, let's say you own an HVAC company and you're doing $5 million in revenue and $1 million in adjusted EBITDA. And let's say a buyer values it at 4x EBITDA. If you take 1 million times 4, that's a $4 million valuation. A private equity group might buy your company and 9 other similar HVAC businesses. And then what they do is they come up with a brand. They get a marketing company, they come up with a really cool brand and a really cool logo, like One Day Air Conditioning, or, these one day things are really big, right? So then basically what they'll do is roll all those up, and then they have one company be the platform company, is what they call it. And then it runs all of the different things underneath it. And so the roll up does the biggest thing that a roll up can do. It centralized things like marketing, their call centers, their dispatch, their accounting. So instead of all these companies having separate accounting person, they have one that runs all of them. Someone that deals with purchasing, someone that deals with financing, one manager. So when you think about that one person running all of those things, I've seen people say like, we'll buy 80% of your HVAC company today and you'll roll 20% of your equity into our larger company. That's actually something called rollover equity. So for example, if your business is valued at 5 million, you might receive roughly 80%. You'll get $4 million in your value at closing, and then you'll get 20% as 1 million rolled into the larger company. So there's a term that we use as business brokers. It's called the second bite of the apple. And what that means is you don't get the whole, you'll get a second bite later on. So that's kind of a term that we use. Anyone else want to chime in here and talk about any good roll-ups that you've seen or anything that you want to chime in right there?
The only thing I would add into that is like preparing ahead of time, right? So if you're doing this, you kind of got both sides. Again, I look at this in a buy side and sell side. So as an M&A or consultant or business broker, you're looking for those platform companies that are looking for that buy box of those to sell, right? And so we're setting that up as those are institutional buyers that are going to go in and buy. And so you're going to want to look at it that way. On the sell side, you're going to want to prepare for that. You're going to want to make sure that you're getting all this well in advance. And so just because you're not looking to sell right now, you could look to get this cleaned up and get it looking right for that strategic buyer, or figuring out how you can become that platform company.
I would just say that in preparation for that, those big institutional buyers are going to be very sophisticated on reviewing financial records. And, that's one of the big things I'm sure we'll talk about through the process is getting ready to sell. Probably the best thing you can do for your business is get your financial records in order and ready to be scrutinized by an institutional buyer who's going to be very sophisticated, have accountants at their disposal, et cetera.
Yeah,
Good point.
absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for being with us today. Bye now.